Good evening and happy hearthwarming. We've got a special episode for the season, so get some hot chocolate and a blanket and listen up. This is FIM Fiction Roulette, a series where I go through the annals of FIM fiction, take a random story and a random chapter from within said story, if applicable, and read it aloud for all of you to hear. Can you hear the carols in the streets, smell the delightful treats, and feel the warmth in your heart despite the snowflake on your cheek? Today's seasonal episode is a random story about this beloved holiday, hearthwarming, which also happens to be the title of today's story, a romance between Twilight and Grogar. I'm a bit surprised by this inspired ship. I've certainly never heard of this one before, which only leaves me more intrigued. Well, before your hot chocolate begins to cool, let's begin. As always, we'll start with the introduction and then head into our selected chapter. This being a one-shot, we will get the luxury of reading this story in its entirety. Without further ado, this is Hearthwarming by Lady Kimba. King Grogar has to endure another hearthwarming encounter lot with his wife Twilight Sparkle and their daughter Adora Sparkle. And now onto the story. Hearthwarming was Grogar's least favorite holiday. He wasn't fond of any pony holidays, and there were many, but he disliked hearthwarming the most. There was a part of him, buried deep down below, that could even consider it an insult to who he once was. The holiday that solidified unity between the creatures he once brought misery to. Even with those days long behind him now, those feelings still lingered, only made worse with the lack of care he had for his subjects. Years had passed since he took the throne by Queen Twilight Sparkle's side, but nothing changed in how he viewed them. He only held enough love and care in his heart for his wife and their beloved young daughter, and unfortunately for him, both were as swept up in the festivities as the rest of Equestria and beyond. Adora Sparkle was particularly giddy about the whole thing, as he was being reminded of now as he walked beside the excited young filly. Her short mane bounced with her prancing. "I can't wait for the big party later, Daddy," Adora said gleefully. This was the first year Adora was old enough to fully understand and engage in the festivities, and her mother had done well to ramp up her excitement. "Mommy says every pony is going to come." The term every pony made Grogar have to force down a grimace nearly every time he heard it. Instead, he smiled down at his daughter.
"Of course they are, my little constellation. I'm sure no creature would miss it for the world."
"I want to see all the pretty decorations put up, and the yummy foods, and all the presents." Adora let out a tiny squeal at the last bit. Grogar chuckled. Adora stopped in her tracks to face her father, front hooves tapping on the carpet. "What did you ask for this year, Daddy?" Grogar's brows raised and he halted.
"Me?"
"Yeah, what presents did you ask for?" Adora asked again, with sparkling eyes. Grogar hesitated. Of course he hadn't asked for anything. Even when Twilight tried to get an answer out of him, he just didn't care about receiving gifts himself. So, with a warm smile and a few gentle strokes to her mane, he gave her the same answer he gave his queen.
"I don't need any gifts. I have everything I could ever need right here."
"But Daddy, you gotta get gifts on hearthwarming. Won't you be sad to see everybody else opening gifts and you don't have one?"
Not in the slightest, he thought.
In fact, he wasn't planning on staying for the whole party, but he wouldn't tell his daughter that.
"I think we should be talking about your gifts, my dear. How many do you think you'll get this year,
"A whole mountain of gifts." Adora's front hooves shot up high to emphasize the mountain she envisioned. "Lots of gifts from all my family and friends."
"A whole mountain?"
Grogar lifted a hoof to his chin and hummed in thought.
"That's a lot. Are you sure you've been good enough this year to get so many?"
"Of course I have," Adora replied confidently. "I've been the best princess ever."
"Indeed you have."
Grogar gave his daughter a small nuzzle.
"Come, we have to see if your mother needs any help preparing for tonight."
The pair continued down the long hallway. Adora began singing a hearthwarming carol to herself as she trotted beside her father. Had it been any creature else, Grogar would have let his annoyance come through. But this was his daughter, and he would never dare to upset her by dashing her holiday spirit, so he would simply bear it. Adora Sparkle was too wrapped up in her own delight to ever notice her father's distaste anyway, and that was precisely how Grogar preferred it. They reached their destination just as Adora reached the end of her song, belting out the last note loudly to announce her entrance into the large ballroom. Queen Twilight Sparkle turned her attention to her daughter and husband as they entered. "Some pony sure seems excited," Twilight said as she hung up a holly branch wreath with her magic. "When is the party going to start, Mommy?" Adora asked as she and Grogar approached. "Not until this evening. There's still a lot that needs to be done." Her wing gestured to the others, who were helping set up for the big event. Ponies, dragons, Kieran, and other creatures working together to make the setup perfect. "Can I help too, Mommy? Can I?" Adora pleaded. "I don't see why not." Twilight's answer was met with a sound of glee as she and Grogar watched their daughter rush off to offer her help. Twilight's happy expression changed as she looked at Grogar, brows furrowing. "You know, you don't need to come tonight if you don't want to."
"I owe it to our daughter to attend,"
he murmured back, watching Adora holding up decorations to give to those who needed them. "I'm sure she would understand if you didn't go. I just don't want you to be uncomfortable. I know you don't care for hearthwarming."
"It's only one night, Twilight. I'm sure I can survive."
Twilight frowned, but she knew better than to argue with him once his mind was made up. She sighed but gave Grogar a quick kiss on the cheek. "Just do what will make you happy." Grogar watched her fly up to give further instructions before taking a look around him. The room really was coming to life with both decor and the ever-flowing enthusiasm around him. Adora was singing her little carol again, and now she was joined by those closest to her. It made Grogar's ears twitch. He couldn't wait until he didn't have to hear that again for another year. He sighed and left the room. He knew he wasn't going to get much peace tonight, so he hoped to get some in now while he could, before he was forced to bear the ridiculous traditions that came with this accursed holiday. He knew Twilight was right, that he didn't have to be there, but he couldn't stand the thought of Adora's sadness thanks to her father not being around. For her, he would endure. The party was in full swing at the Candlelight Castle. The ballroom was filled with colorful creatures of all shapes, sizes, and species. Times like this were when Twilight could really see how much her hard work in creating a perfect utopia for all Equus's creatures had paid off. It filled her with utmost pride to see her success she and her friends had made over the years. Yet Grogar couldn't share her delight. He felt uncomfortable in this entire situation standing by his wife's side, adorned in the outfit Rarity had gone out of her way to make for him and matched Twilight's. Even if she said it was a pleasure to make them, Grogar took note of how she kept her attention mostly focused on Twilight and hardly on him. That was fine. He didn't need her approval, or any creature else's, but it made his crimson eyes peer down at the work Rarity put into it, as if to find any flaws he could scrutinize. But of course there were none. He felt Twilight's large wing over his back suddenly, and she whispered excitedly, "Look, Adora's talking with the other kids." Grogar looked to where Twilight motioned her head and saw their daughter talking to who he knew were the children of Applejack and Rarity, and even Rainbow Dash and Flash Magnus. He had to hold back a snort in disgust that wanted to leave his nose. Dora was usually such an introverted child, and Grogar and Twilight had kept a watchful, protective eye over her, but it seemed a day like this was the exception to their usual rules. "She seems so happy," Twilight added with a fond smile on her face to see her little star getting on with her friend's children so well.
"Yes, she does,"
Grogar finally answered. Even if he was feeling protective in the moment, seeing Adora look so delighted was enough to still put a smile on the old ram's muzzle. Adora seemed to catch on that her parents were watching her, and she said something to the small group before galloping over to them. "Happy hearthwarming, Mommy and Daddy!" Adora exclaimed cheerfully. "Happy hearthwarming," Twilight said, pulling her in for a tight hug and nuzzle. "I know we aren't supposed to do gifts till later, but I'm too excited to wait." The young filly reached into her dress, pulling out 2 handmade sun catchers. "Something for you both to hang up and catch the sun or moonlight. You like 'em?" Twilight's was made with purple and pink beads, Grogar's with blue and white, and both had a star-shaped prism at the ends that reflected the light in the room.
"Adora, you made these?"
Grogar asked in awe. Adora nodded. "Yeah. I know you said you didn't want any gifts, but I didn't want to see you be left out. I made the colors match so you would know which is yours, and I put stars on them because you both call me star names. These are beautiful, Twilight commented as she held up her sun catcher and her magic, as Grogar did the same. It was Grogar who nuzzled her first while Twilight still held her.
But you know you're the greatest gift we could ever ask for, he murmured.
That's why we named you Adora, Twilight added, hugging them both in her wings now. When they parted, Adora rejoined the other children. Grogar wrapped the loop of his catcher around one of the buttons on his suit so he could wear it with pride for the evening. Twilight wrapped hers around the necklace she was wearing. So you don't like getting gifts, huh? Twilight teased, head motioning to the catcher on his chest.
Grogar cleared his throat. You know well this situation is different.
Of course, Twilight answered. Inside, she was making note of this to use to her advantage later, but she didn't press the issue further. She couldn't anyway, when she and Grogar needed to pay attention to their many guests, and Twilight was very eager to spend some more time with her friends and old teacher again. Grogar ended up needing to step away from the festivities a few hours later. He was tired of socializing for one night. He stood out on the castle balcony, taking a deep breath of the cool winter air. There was a light snowfall around him, decorating the ground around his hooves. The sounds of the party behind him seemed far away as he focused on the quiet outside. It helped him recollect himself. He was considering going back inside when he noticed the sound of crunching snow before Twilight came into view next to him. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said gently, giving him a nuzzle and a kiss.
"I told you I would,"
he murmured in return to her loving affection. "I know, but it still means a lot. You know Adora and I love hearthwarming." He let out a low hum in response, cradling the sun catcher in his cloven hoof. Though it was dim, the prism still managed to reflect some of the moon's light on its surface. He smiled down at it. "Are you thinking of turning in for the night?" Twilight asked.
"I think I'll attend for a little longer," he replied, still looking at his gift.
Twilight couldn't help but smile at the sight. Even if it was only a small step in the right direction, she was thrilled to see him easing up. "I'll wait for you inside, then. Just don't stay out here too long. It's cold." She left them after that. Grogar wouldn't be too far behind, but he wanted to watch the light on the star for a moment or two longer. His little constellation had given him something so beautiful, so wonderful, a lovely reflection of the young princess herself, and a way for him to always think of her. But for now, he could feel the cold seeping into his coat, so he would go back inside and try to enjoy the rest of the time at the party. After all, with Twilight and Adora at his side, hearthwarming was one of his favorite holidays. Now doesn't that just warm the soul? Who doesn't love an old man learning to love the holidays? It's always sweet, and I'm a sucker for sweet. Speaking of the sweetest of things, the relationship between Grogar and his child Adora. Believable, adorable, and most definitely the best part of this lovely tale. I feel like I'd have to read more of this Twilight and Grogar ship before I'm fully won over, but at least in this story, it was nice. They both had their differences and worked with each other on them, a little give and take on both ends. Also, I'm quite glad that Lady Kimba believes in the true best ship for Applejack. Gotta give a shout out when I see it. This story was perfect for the holiday, and I'm glad I was able to share it with all of you. My question for you, my dear viewers, is how do you think Twilight and Grogar got together in the first place? I'm honestly dying to know. This was Hearthwarming. Thank you, Lady Kimba, for making such a wonderful story. The link will be in the description below. And thank you, listeners, for joining me on this exciting adventure. This is Open Air, signing off. But don't worry, I'll be back soon with another FIM Fiction Roulette. Happy Hearthwarming, every pony.